Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Marcia Heath, author of Little Giant. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So this is actually, I'll be very honest with the audience. This is actually take two on this podcast episode. You and I have been there and done that already. We recorded a few weeks ago and I had some technical issues, so we decided to re-record. So thank you for that and being willing to redo the interview with me. But I just know the second time is going to be even better, right?
Yes, I hope so.
Well, Marcia, I'd love for you to start out by telling us about your book. So I mentioned it's Little Giant. The subtitle is The Story of Aruba's Surf Shop and the Rebels Who Built It. It's a little different than some of the books I have on, but I loved the story of the book and why you wrote it. So tell us a little bit about kind of what led to you writing this book.
Mhm. Well, the book is about following our dreams and choosing a life that suits us, not necessarily a life that society hands us. And my situation before I wrote the book was I was very good at following the default path. And I was sort of an anxious super achiever in my career as a marketing executive and a brand expert, as a book editor. But at a certain point, I felt that the life I was leading was someone else's good idea of a life, not my own. And I'm leading up to the book here because I really firmly believe, looking back on this book, that it started years before. It started when I had an episode of what's called transient global amnesia. And that was in 2017. And I was working the quote unquote perfect job for me at the time. It was in a small consulting firm, and I rode my bike to work and I looked out on a park and everything on paper looked great. But then I had this episode where my husband came home from, I guess it was a Saturday, so he came home from an errand and found me in the house in a wool skirt and a bathing suit top. And this is Florida in the summer. And I was saying, get me to work. I'm late. I've got to get to work. And I kept saying it over and over again. So obviously it clicked to him that he needed to rush me to the hospital. And there they told me when I woke up out of this 24 hours later that I'd had a case of losing my mind, basically losing my memory. And it's usually something that goes away. It doesn't come back, but it can be profoundly disturbing to not know who you are, not remember anything.
Yeah.
And so after I came home, my dear husband brought me back. I sat down with him. I said, something is really off here. And he said, you think? He had been very aware, more than I was, that I was force fitting myself into that career, that job. And so together we worked out how we could scale back our finances and live without mine having a W-2, basically, becoming an independent creative person. And so that led into my being a freelancer for artists, very creative people who really didn't like promoting themselves. So I would help them get their work out in the world. And I did that for a while, and I realized, this is me too. I'm disguising myself as a person helping other people be creative, but in fact, don't I have some creativity too here? And so that led to my second crisis during COVID, where I felt like none of my super achievements added up to much. I felt that I'd really got an A+ on projects that I were important at the time, but looking back, they didn't really add up to a meaningful pursuit of happiness. And so that led me to Aruba. I'm getting there. And I sat under a mango tree the first day. I was with my son-in-law, whom I met very late in life because I married his dad rather late in life. And he started talking about his surf shop. And I was thinking about snorkeling. I was thinking about going to the beach. I was thinking about forgetting myself. And he said some things that just struck me as like seismic choices that he had made early in his life, in his 20s with his best friend, where they started the surf shop. And that so intrigued me that they walked away from huge careers, very prestigious careers, to do a surf shop, that I said to myself, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to write this story. Damn it, I don't care. I'm going to stay on the bus. I'm not going to get off after 3 stops. I'm going to write this story because there's something here. So that's the lead up to the book.
Okay. So I want to go back for a second to when you talked about, what did you call it? Global amnesia?
Transient global amnesia. Yes.
Transient global amnesia.
Mhm.
So first of all, what causes that? I mean, you talked about like you were trying to fit into this role at work. Is it caused by stress? Like what, or do they know what causes it?
That's an excellent question. And I think generally it's a high stress that causes it. There are other things too, but generally it's caused by stress.
Okay.
Yeah. And
And how do you come back from that? Like, how did you eventually remember things? Like, do you snap out of it? Was it just like, like how how did you remember who you were and what you did after that?
well, it is very odd to think of that, but I remember coming back to consciousness in the hospital. There
Okay.
was a doctor there with a clipboard or whatever they hold. And he said, "What's your name?" I knew my name. And he said, "Who's the president?" I said, Hillary Clinton. So I was a little bit off on that. But memories come back in fragments. And then usually within 2 days or so, you have recovered your sense of self. But in that time, it's a black hole in the time that you have it.
So it's kind of like a not momentary, but like a short period of time. It all goes away and then it like kind of comes back. So, you mentioned that, you left that job then to kind of pursue creativity, to pursue some sort of creative pursuit in your life, and you were freelancing. Do you have any idea why uh that creative outlet was helpful or necessary for you? Like what I don't know. I guess I don't even know how to ask that question, but like why was that the piece that was needed? Was that just what you needed? Is that kind of what anyone would need in that place? Like what was the creativity kind of piece in that?
Another great question. I suppose that the freelance work I did came back to what I'd always kind of knew about myself, which was that I love words. I'd studied words all my life and I love stories. And so when I became a freelancer helping creative artists tell their stories, it was very satisfying at first because I saw how they struggled, how many of us struggle to talk about ourselves in a way that shows our true value. But then I realized in all my career, I've been the person behind the scenes. I've been the brand person who helped companies look better. I've been the strategic planner who helped organizations improve. I've always been the facilitator versus someone visible. And there was a certain hiding there and a lack of confidence and a fear that eventually just got to me. I read a book called Oliver Berkman's book called 4,000 Weeks. And he said that if you're 90 years old, if you're lucky, you live to be 40, you have 4,700 weeks in your life. When I heard that, I thought, that's not very many. I think that it's time to get going here. So that
Mm,
really propelled me into writing this book.
mm. So it's almost like I don't know, pursuit of things that you care about. So maybe that's not necessarily like doesn't have to be creativity necessarily, but the pursuit of things that matter to you um was kind of what you needed to get out of that. And uh somewhat, I mean, money matters, right? Like you have to be able to pay your bills, but like if you can take some of that out and pursue what your I don't like to say pursue your passion because I just read the book So Good They Can't Ignore You, where Cal Newport actually argues against the pursuit your
Yes.
so
Yes. I
every
love
time
that.
I go to say it now, I'm like, dang it. But anyways, you know what I mean. Pursuing
Yes.
that thing that that you're it's almost like the having control of your life and having control of your work, which is also argued in So Good They Can't Ignore You. So rather than pursuing your passion, it's the control over the things that you are doing. That was really what you needed to kind of get out of um, that stress of what, being that person that was supporting things behind the scenes. Um, anyway, so let's go a little bit more into the book itself. So this was it's your stepson, right? And his business partner. And so you were inspired by them and wanted to write their story. Um, what is it about, well, actually, they also were kind of in that place, right, of um being in control of what they're doing. They own this shop and they were very focused on their own mission, the culture they wanted to create, the the company they wanted to have, which um, again comes down to like being able to control your environment and create an environment that you love and that you value. So tell me a little bit about what you learned about their business and how they were running it and why that was so inspiring.
Hmm. I originally, when I sat down and thought about this book, I thought I was writing a book about a business, and of course I was, particularly a purple cow business. So Seth Godin came up with that phrase for businesses that are intrinsically remarkable because the founders have a remarkable vision. And that little surf shop to me is a microcosm of a purple cow because they broke all the rules, basically of retail, and yet this shop is 21 years old and a cultural sensation on the island and in the Caribbean, and they're still very much beloved as the co-founders of the shop. And so I was very fascinated by the business side at first, and then once I got into researching what they had actually done, I saw the parallels with my own life, as you were alluding to. So they happened to, they made a decision in their late 20s that they're going to hop off the conveyor belt and do their best to design a life of their own choosing. And they had such great values. They didn't have a business plan, and they didn't have angel investors. They didn't have a lot of money, but they did have values, and their values were: let's have fun, let's stay friends no matter what, and let's do something good for the community that the community needs. And that those three values have guided their business from day one and created actually an example of how to live a life based on your own rules rather than following someone else's rules. And I think that's why this book is appealing to people, because it's a vicarious journey into the world of creation of your own lifestyle and your own life. And it can happen. These guys did it. So that became my fascination, their ability to form a life, choosing to choose their own life really is what they did so well.
Hmm. And they are still there in Aruba. They still have that business. And so I noticed that one of the values that you mentioned wasn't like making millions of dollars or
Yeah.
even like having a successful business. I assume the business is successful enough that they're able to run it. And but it wasn't like that wasn't necessarily their goal. It was the having an environment that was, what did you say, fun, and they remained friends and giving back to the community. Those were the three.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, well, yeah. So who is the target reader for this book? Like who is the person that you wrote this for with the other than for yourself? Because I know that that was a big part of your journey, but what did you intend for the reader to get out of this book?
Hmm. I think the reader is a person who may be very successful in their life by external standards, but someone who feels frustrated and maybe compromised, that they're not doing all they can do to live a life of wonder and joy. And that could be a digital nomad. It could be someone in a corporate job. It could be a gig worker. It could be anyone who feels there's more that I could do with my life. And I'd like to see a model of how someone else did it. And in this case, the model is set in the sunny Caribbean. There are surfboards, there's music, there are incredibly interesting people. So in a way, it's almost like reading historical fiction, because you get to just immerse yourself in these two guys' journey from corporate jobs to their own life of their own choosing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, anyone in a place where maybe they're starting a business or thinking about doing something different. Um, yeah. What you mentioned your background in publishing. Um, did that give you like, I don't know, did you have kind of a inside view of how to write and publish your book because of your background? Like did that influence what you did in the writing process or anything with just the way you approached your book project?
I think it did. I think it gave me a grounding in basic storytelling and the beauty of the language, if you can make it happen. But it also gave me a false confidence, because I started this book as sort of a business book with inspirational lessons, and it turned into creative nonfiction, which is like a merger of fiction in some ways and nonfiction, where there's scene setting, world building, dialogue, lots of research, interviews. I mean, it turned into this monstrously, for me, complex project. And so I got on that bus, as I talked about, and I created a pretty big journey for myself with this book. And I had to be in discomfort for a long time before I could figure out how to really make the story come alive.
You were able to focus on it mostly full time, right? Like you, at that point, this was kind of your project that you were fully focused on. You weren't working a job and doing this on the side, right?
I had I still have freelance clients whom I've had since I started my business, freelance business, and they've kept me going financially and also emotionally, because I love working with them. But this was very much, I felt, a full-time effort. So up in the morning at 5:30, well, coffee first, always coffee first, up at 5:30 and just go at it. And I did that basically pretty much every day for 3 years to finish this thing.
That's what I was going to ask is how long did it take? So 3 years of writing like that, balancing clients and stuff, but like you were able to focus, which is, I mean, I was going to say you were lucky to have that because not all authors do, but part of what led you to that point was maybe not so lucky to get there, but uh,
Yeah.
not to take away from, the transient global amnesia that you had that kind of led you to that space, but it's nice that you had that space to do that writing, because this seems like it would have been a hard project to try to juggle on top of a full-time job. Like, okay, I'm going to come home at night and write for a couple of hours. Like, you were really able to immerse yourself in it, which is great. How much of the time writing were you actually in Aruba? Did you get to spend a lot of time there while you were writing?
I've been to Aruba 7 or 8 times now to do research, but
Yeah.
also out
For
to
you.
someone had to do it. But most of my writing has been in snowy or whatever Maine. So I live in mid-coast Maine. And that was another, I think, unexpected gift of writing this book, in that I was in this very different environment in Maine, and I was able to walk around in the world of these two guys in the Caribbean for 3 years and get out of my own petty concerns and really project, how do I tell this story so people love them, but also get value out of this? And that was a tremendous challenge. I love solving that puzzle.
Yeah, yeah. How did they feel about being the subject of the book?
Well, and ordinarily, from my book publishing background, if someone came up to you and said, "Hey, I think you're really interesting. I'd love to write a book about you," you'd say, "Yes, Thank you so much. Well, they looked at me and the puzzlement was their expression, mystification. They, first of all, they did not understand what was so interesting about their story, which I think many of us don't always appreciate how interesting we can
Sure.
be. And secondly, they're very private, self-effacing, phobic, publicly phobic people. And so it was not a slam dunk yay when I told them about the book. And they only really said yes when I promised I wouldn't make them out to be heroes or gurus, number one. And then secretly they said to themselves, she'll never finish. She'll never finish this, so let's not worry. So on those weird premises, I went forward with the book.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they seem like the kind of, I mean, I don't know them, but they seem like the kind of guys who would um maybe be resistant to the attention a bit. Like, they're not in it for that, which is great. So, um, well, really fascinating story. I can't wait to read the book. I noticed you have it available on Kindle Unlimited, which is great. So anyone who has Kindle Unlimited can get it for free. Um, Tell me also just about the publishing path that you took. So being from the publishing industry previously, you had some insider knowledge about publishing, the publishing process, maybe even a lot of contacts in the publishing world. How did you approach publishing this book?
Originally, I thought I would go traditional publishing and get an agent. And then I just got impatient and I decided, well, I'll do it myself as part of my creative blossoming, I guess. And I ended up consulting with a lot of experts in book publishing along the way because so much is changing constantly in the book publishing world. And so I got help at virtually every turn from great designers, great editors, a book coach who's versed in creative nonfiction, and they really put out their hand and helped me a lot of the way. And I never could have finished without all that outside help. That's me. I mean, other people seem to do it more seamlessly, but that's what it took for me to get this book out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah, you had those contacts.
Mhm.
But, also just knowing that you published on your own, that comes up in this podcast often, the question whether it's whether you should go the self-publishing route or uh, hold out for a traditional publisher. In your experience, you went the self-publishing route. It was self-published, right? Not hybrid.
It was an indie published book. Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Mhm.
And I think, that's the message I like to share often is that it's okay to self-publish your book. The publishing world has come a long way since probably since you started in it, but definitely since I started in it 20 years ago. It used to be very there's a stigma with self-publishing that was seen as vanity publishing. You're just paying to get your book published. There was that attitude behind, there was that snobbiness, right, from the publishing world. But now, I mean, almost everyone I've had on my podcast has self-published their books. It's so much more common, it's more accepted, and it's really, really easy to do. So I love that you have that background, but also chose to do the self-publishing route on your own. Well, anything else about your story, your book that you want to share with the audience that you want to inspire people around?
Well, I just got back from Aruba again, and we were filming shot the last of the documentary. So there's a documentary being made about the book,
Mhm.
and I think it shows that this story has some universal interest, and that there's certain charisma about this story that's being translated from the page to the screen. And it's been so fascinating to learn to be a storyteller of a documentary versus a storyteller on the page.
Hmm.
And I have so much to learn about that too. But I think it's going to be fascinating, this documentary. It's going to come out this year, and it's going to be 20 minutes, which is a sweet spot for festivals. And it will be a complement to the book. I think will give a different angle and a different immediacy to the story. So I just wanted to mention that, and I'd be happy to share it with your listeners when it's available. They can find me on my website, thelittlegiantbook.com. And that's coming up this year.
Well, that's really exciting. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is
You,
pretty cool.
you had this inspiration, you wrote this book, and now there's going to be a documentary. So that's really exciting. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the guys behind the story, even though they don't really want the attention, but that's okay. Well, Marcia, I was going to ask where people can find you, but you shared your website. I will link in the show notes to the book. Is there any other way people can keep in touch with you or find out more about what you're doing?
I think the best place for now is the website.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Great.
that would be
Well,
good.
thank you so much for sharing this story and spending the time writing this book. Again, I can't wait to read it, and thank you for coming on and sharing all of this with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I loved your questions and I love the focus of your show. So thank you so much.
For a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey, join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com.